Hey everybody, DeathsStalker here. So I was on my Twitter feed reading what was going on, like I do every morning when I first get up, and I happened to notice a question by a motovlogger I follow in England called EpicAdam, and I thought I'll just put his Twitter feed up here. And he had a question. He was asking the general community about putting a larger than normal sized front tire on his motorcycle. And there was a few comments back and forth. So I was going to reply back. And the problem is that the actual answer was going to be more than you could do in a typical Twitter feed. And it probably would end up be 5 or 6 tweets in a row trying to get it across. So I thought what I would do is I just make a little short video for him. So what Adam is asking is that his front tire is a certain size. And the mechanic had told him he can have the next size up larger tire on his motorcycle, and he said actually it would handle better. Now that may or not be true. Generally with most motorcycles, the front tire the motorcycle came with is the motorcycle tire it should be using. Now in some situations there are some motorcycles, especially in the 1980s, that had unusually narrow front wheels by today's standards. And those motorcycles were actually a little bit twitchy, and actually putting a wider front tire on it made the motorcycle actually handle a little more sedately. So instead of having the motorcycle constantly falling over in corners, it actually felt more like a normal motorcycle. Generally that has been engineered out of motorcycles nowadays, so that doesn't really hold true anymore. But still being said, sometimes you can get away putting a larger front tire. On the rear, it's usually not a problem, but the front's a little bit more picky because this is where you do your steering and majority of your braking. Now, just to give you an idea, there are generally 2 types of motorcycle tires. There is what's called a round profile and a triangular profile. Now, this here, I actually took a profile of my wife's Honda Shadow profile, and as you can see, it's rather wide, especially compared to my bike, and it's very flat. Now the profile on my bike is a little more shallow, and it just happens to be a cruiser versus a sport bike, but they're actually both what would still be classed as a round profile. Now the triangle profile is exaggerated. It's just basically like almost like a V shape with a rounded end, and it was pretty common in the 1980s, early 1990s. It's not as much as it's not as common nowadays, but it is still out there on certain motorcycles, and they each have advantages and disadvantages. The triangular tires generally provide you more side grip as you go around corners, so they tend to be on high performance motorcycles, where the rounded profiles tend to be more on the cruisers and the everyday motorcycles that majority of people ride. Now the one thing about adding a wider profile, and I'll just put it on here. The one thing about adding a wider profile is that the current arc you have here is going to possibly be a little bit larger, but you might actually get the opposite, because the rim on the motorcycle is a certain width, 3.5, 4 4.25 inches wide, and the tire is designed to work on that size rim. However, if you're putting a wider tire on a narrower rim, instead of actually being wider, what you actually would have, the tire would actually be narrow at the outer edges, so you actually would have less cornering ability as you go around a corner, because the tire is actually folding back on itself. So that's one of the reasons why the manufacturers usually have one spec tire for the front and leave it at that. Now, if you go on the tire manufacturer website and put your bike model in, the tire manufacturers will actually list all the tires that are available for your bike, and that they know that will fit and work on the bike. So sometimes some manufacturers actually might offer multiple choices for the front. Not very often, but on certain motorcycles it's out there. And what I'd recommend, if you really want to make certain, if you're not certain, is go and check the manufacturers like Dunlop, Michelin, Bridgestone, etc., and see what they offer for your tires. It's on every company's website, so it's pretty easy to find. Now the one advantage of having a wider tire, if your bike is a little skittish, it actually would slow down the turning when you go to lean the motorcycle over. So instead of having a motorcycle that would actually feel like it's almost going to fall over, it was something that was pretty common with the 16-inch wheels that we used to have in the 80s. And you go to turn into a corner and the bike felt like it was about to fall right over, and then it would halfway through that it would just start cornering. And it was something that was pretty unnerving, and that's one of the reasons why most motorcycles now run 17-inch front wheels. Sport bikes, that is. Now, would I recommend going to a wider front wheel over a standard wheel? Not really, but going wider is less dangerous than going narrow. Because if you actually put a narrower tire on your motorcycle than stock, the motorcycle will turn easier and lighter. It will turn quicker, but it would also be a little more unstable. Also, when you make a narrower tire, when you have a narrower tire, your contact patch, in other words, this part right here where you do the majority of your braking, is smaller, so your actual braking ability becomes less. On the wider tires, you actually might get slightly larger braking area. But to put it in perspective, one size wider tire, you're talking maybe 3 or 4 millimeters at the most of contact patch. And on the street, you're not going to notice the ability to brake better. You'd be better off buying a better, higher performance tire that fits the motorcycle if you're looking at something like that. So hopefully that's enough information so you can sort of make your own choice. Rear tires are slightly different. It's actually easier to go wider or narrower on rear tires, especially if you're doing track time on the bikes. I'm not going to get into that on this video, but on the fronts, you have to be a little more conscious because, again, the majority of your braking and all your steering input is basically done through this tire here. I like to put something in perspective. Okay, the size of this washer here is about how much contact you have on the front tire as you're actually going down the road. Now, of course, it's elongated, but no matter where you are, that's all the rubber you have on the road. So you want to make certain you're not messing with that as you're riding. So anyways, I hope that gives you a little bit of insight as to the pluses and minuses of changing your front tire width from standard. Again, it's your choice. Talk it over with the mechanic. And what I would do is, again, go look and see what the tire manufacturers recommend for your bike. DeathsStalker signing off.